morning, people of the internet. You are listening to Debi Radio 79.5 FM, a podcast where we discuss the movie Grosse Point Blank 1 minute at a time. I am your co-host, Hugh David, and with me today...
I am Dev Sodiger, and on today's show we're going to be looking at minute 10. Joining us, we have, once again, the wonderful Billy Holku, self-professed generic nerd. Hey, Billy!
Hey, how you doing?
Yeah, we're good.
Glad to be back.
Hey, it is great to have you back. Yeah, it's been really fun talking with you about this. This is we're getting some real insight into the film from different angles. So, Dev, do you want to fill us in on where we are at minute 10?
So, we've just had the drop of poison miss the mouth, the target of Martin Blank's target. Martin's having to reconsider and rushes to finish the job with a silenced pistol. He jumps out the room, runs downstairs, and takes out the target. And then we cut to, via a couple of long shots, we get back to him returning to his office, or from our perspective, entering his office for the first time and actually coming face to face with his secretary Marcella, played by the ever wonderful Joan Cusack.
Indeed. Joan Cusack fan club sitting right here.
Definitely.
Billy, you were saying in previous episodes that amongst the many kinds of films you like, rom-coms are high on the list. Would you agree with me that Joan Cusack was actually not wasted, but she's always been the best friend, hasn't she, in the rom-coms?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, just kind of. Yeah, wait. Yeah, never actually thought about that, but yeah, you should. I'm actually right now struggling. What rom-com lead that she's actually been in?
Yeah, I can't think of one either, but she's definitely turns up in them quite a lot as the sassy best friend, and it's kind of, this is half the fun of. I can see why she took this role, because she gets to be sassy without having to be the best friend. She can just be sassy. But yeah, the hit is interesting because, of course, it goes wrong, right? And then we get to Joan. So let's talk about the hit going wrong. Why does it go wrong? Why does the Miami job not go the way it's supposed to? And what do we think about that? I mean, do we think this makes sense? Is it logical? Is it not logical? Is it an interesting plot point? Or is it just, well, hey, clearly not everything can be accounted for?
I mean, I feel like there's a reason that arsenic in the water on the night glass or on the nightstand is the preferred method of assassination in so many murder mysteries, right? Like, this is, as we've already discussed, right? It feels like this is quite a elaborate way of killing somebody. It's not quite stroking your white cat whilst there's a laser beam trying to slice somebody in half elaborate, but it's getting there. It is quite slow, and admittedly the target should be asleep and it should help there, but it does feel like there are better ways to carry out an execution that's meant to look like a natural death or an accident. There are other things that can be done. But it does make for some great cinema.
I mean, it also means Martin's never seen You Only Live Twice. Because if you'd seen it...
It didn't work so well.
Yeah, exactly.
No.
Clearly when he ran away from school, one thing that wasn't on his list is his movies. But what I think, for me, the whole point of the scene is to set up him having to look his victim in the face and talk to the victim. I think that's the whole point of it. We get what we said last minute, where we learn about his meticulousness and his nature and all of that. But then the point is to make that go wrong and force him to have to be face to face with the victim and then deal with that emotionally. Because he's not Grosse, and he's not going to respond like Grosse does. Grosse will empty every bullet he's got at the guy before the guy says another word. And Martin doesn't. It's actually far more interesting that way. There's also something interesting about the whole way he has to run down the stairs. There's something sort of, I don't know, it's slightly comic, but it's also, 90s movies, action movies, there's a lot of guys running around stairs shooting each other quite a bit. Leon's got it, and, what's the other film that's got it? There's quite a few that have it at the time.
It feels like the teenager running to get the door when
Yeah.
like their friends come over or something, right? Like it's kind of enthusiastic, but not very polished.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, he's in panic, isn't he? Because as he says later on in office, they've done extensive sleep research. So he's sat and watched this guy sleep for nights on end, thinking, oh well, the technology that I have states that he's in this part of deep sleep. So he doesn't seem to have a plan B.
That's a good point.
You know,
He doesn't, does he?
Yeah.
no, because a plan B could be that he doesn't actually have to shoot the guy. If he's so good with a hand-to-hand combat, he could easily, I don't know, disabled him at some point and then force the poison into his mouth.
Yeah.
And or back to the point that Hugh made, right? Like if he was really panicking, he could have just shot down from above.
Yeah, there's that too.
He already had that full opening and that line of sight. But I think it underscores that point that you made, Hugh, that they are trying to get Martin Blank to have a face-to-face with his target.
Yeah, and the dialogue is incredibly spare, but very, very interesting. We don't know who this guy is. We don't know what this guy's done. We have literally got no idea why this is happening, and so as an audience, there's kind of an inevitable immediate sympathy with the guy. Ain't none of us want to wake.
Whatever it is you don't like that I'm doing, I'll stop.
Yeah, what a great line!
It's not me.
Yeah, what are those two lines are just so telling, so loaded. They carry so much weight with what they are, but at the same time they sound natural enough, like the sort of thing someone would think to say at that time. And it's just, and you feel for the guy, but then Martin looks not puzzled, but I don't know. The joke that he's Martin Blank as a name, blank by name, blank by nature, I think depends on what you think about John Cusack's acting stuff. Right? I don't know how you guys feel about it. I feel like Cusack is the master of underselling and understating stuff.
Yep.
Yeah,
very much so.
Yeah. And I feel like there is something in his face when he says, "It's not me." And I can't, I feel like it's just, I don't know what you guys think. I feel like there's just a slight flicker of emotion. And then he says that, and you realize he's trying to say, "Don't blame me, not my fault."
Yeah. It's nothing to do. Yeah, it's saying it's nothing to do with him. It's just work. It's just a job, and that's who you are, and that's how he probably separates that in when he's taking a life.
Yeah, which is scary. I mean, which
fits a certain psychological profile.
It does indeed. It does indeed. And although, as he says, I think he's already said at one point, or is it he's about to say, the whole business of the moral flexibility that the Marines felt he had. I love that line. They thought I had an attitude for a certain moral flexibility. Like, what exactly does that mean? You won't blow up a Greenpeace warship, but you will shoot a guy in the face and say it's not your fault. Oh, the fine lines of morality that are defined in this film. It's amazing. So, Dev, the office, as you've said in previous episodes, the office that you don't believe actually ever exists in real life, that nobody has offices like this.
Right. So, I mean, before we get to that, as you mentioned earlier, the hit was actually in Miami. We were having trouble in the last minute yesterday, trying to straighten out in our heads, where the hit happens, and yes, it is actually called out in the script as well that it's in Miami.
Hence the coloured lighting, because it's post Miami Vice.
Right, and yeah, definitely an allusion to Miami Vice. And then we get the panning shot of LA him driving past, like, alongside the airport, and I can't think what airport that is. I feel like there's an airport that famously has a road like that kind of goes right under the runway strip, or not under the runway strip, but right at the end of the runway strip. So you often have aircraft coming in very, very low over it, which I was assuming would be Miami Airport. I don't think it is, though. And then we're back in LA, and it's clearly a shot of the LA skyline, and into this office that I'd still struggle to believe really exists, with the wood paneled walls and the one big reception space with the receptionist desk, and then the private office, And here we see Martin and Marcella interacting face to face for the first time in this movie, and instantly the roles are completely reversed. The sass is gone, the assertiveness is gone. Marcella is now very, very subservient to Martin.
Do you think they always planned it that way, or do you think that might have been a decision on the day? Given Armitage liked to let them play around with the script, he would shoot one take of the script as it was written, and then he would start shooting other takes, letting the actors play with different roles. I wonder if there's a version of that scene that's played the way they already were playing the roles, and then they played with it and said, "What if we do it this way?"
I don't think there can be.
Okay.
And the reason that I say that is there are only two characters that really interact with Martin who know him prior to the start of this film.
Okay.
I mean, you could argue that the federal agents know him, and there's the whole dialogue about meeting him previously, but really, meaningful interactions is Marcella and Grosse.
Okay.
Everybody else in the movie knew him when he was a kid, but not in his recent past.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and actually the psychiatrist, I've forgotten, Oatman.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you need Marcella to react the way she does to give legitimacy to Martin Blank's personality as being somebody who is actually legitimately scary. And I think that's what that's there for, and then it's reinforced with Altman.
Okay, that seems to make some sense to me, I think. Billy, what's your take on it?
I think it's more of the job's gone wrong, and there's that awkward silence that everyone's like, okay, well, now I have to speak to you about this face to face. How am I going to approach it? That's why she's always kind of when she approaches them, I think it was behind the door, wasn't it?
Yeah,
so it's like, oh, so what do we do? So no, they want to make amends,
Right. So
there is that.
Do you think maybe it feels a little bit like she's had him blow up at her before?
Yes. Well, you also got to remember as well. It's like he's a hitman. He could, he doesn't know how he's going to react.
Yeah.
So he could either have a violent outburst or just have this weird, awkward silence.
Yeah.
As to what they're going to say. Do.
I mean, it is interesting. I mean, I remember a few years ago there was one of my first years at this school I'm teaching at now, and there was a point where some kid did a drive-by pizza throw into a classroom, not knowing that yeah, I know it's quite a thing to do, to run past the classroom and fling a pizza into it. Anyway, he didn't know that the teacher in question was in the room with these kids. Wow. It was rainy break, and this was the other end of the building corridor in the building I was in, and I suddenly heard this the sheer loudness of this voice having a go at this kid, and I stepped out to have a look. Everybody stepped out to have a look at the corridor and see what was going on, and the teacher in question is ex-military. Right, he's a former captain in the army and very well dressed man, and he's standing there, hands in his waistcoat, in his jacket pockets, standing there still, just looking at this kid. But the volume that's coming out of his mouth at this kid, and I was like, "That's really scary." And I said to somebody else in my department, I said, "Oh, that's really scary. I've never heard him lose his temper like that." And one of my colleagues said to me, "Well, it's a lot worse when you realise that this man has killed people for real." And I was like, oh yes, that makes it so much worse. And that's what I'm reminded of in this scene. Marcella's kind of like, yeah, this is this man kills people for a living. I need to be really careful about how I work around him. But she obviously it's taken to a comedic extreme. But yeah, I think you're spot on with that, Billy. I feel like you don't know if he's going to lose it or not, because he kicks the door when she starts reading out the letter on the phone to him again. He kicks the car door and he's, and he does say, "You're fired," when she's still reading the letter. So yeah, I think all of that is built into her behavior. I think in addition to what you're saying, Dev, I feel like there's all the other layers. They all count as well towards that. I think it's very intriguing moment. And then, of course, as we mentioned in a previous episode, there is the jacket. I mean, we can't. We're talking about Joan's fashions and the character's fashions and what she's wearing, but that jacket.
Yeah. And I love the fact that he calls it out.
Yeah.
It's not this minute; it's the next minute.
Yeah.
But it is. Yeah, it's quite the fashion statement for sure.
Yeah.
I'm wondering what was the decision making behind that.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Me too.
I mean, I could easily think that Joan Cusack saw that top, saw that dress. I mean, I'm going to wear that. You know, despite what everyone's going to say, and then Joan Cusack just clearly calling it out. You know, as an ad lib.
Yeah. It does sound like an ad lib, doesn't it? I'm trying to see if I can find anything that indicates, you know, because we've already done loads of research before recording this, and yet there are still things we cannot find a clear thing. It's one of those. It's one of the reasons why this film needs a good special edition, is because somebody needs to just go out there and do the research and find out all the things that we don't know about. Because if all the attention it has had over the years, it's never had the degree of attention that a film that is this dense with ideas deserves. And so I would be really interested in finding out. But the other is I'm struggling to remember, because it's 1997, so Britpop is in full swing, and British Cool is back in a big way in the media. And obviously there was a lot of Beatles reference going on at the time, precisely because of Britpop. I mean, I think was it Rolling Stone or New York Times described Oasis as, you know, what the Beatles might have looked like if they'd lived to this era, kind of thing, which I think was overselling it. But you know, you get,
and yet there is no Oasis, there is no Blur, there's no modern Britpop in the soundtrack here.
That's a good point.
And I think that
very good
may
point.
have some Joe Strummer influences in that decision, because I can't imagine that he was particularly enamored with that
era,
that music. Yet you have the Eels in the Hippo Club, right?
Well, that's the thing. The American side of the music in the albums is very much more up to date.
Yeah,
but it's still very 80s.
90s. Well,
the
Eels is 90s.
Yeah, the Eels is 90s, but Violent Femmes are 80s into 90s. Madonna's 80s into 90s. It's that weird thing where the film, we're talking about artists who are still around, but yeah, it is odd. Like, and yeah, but I feel like I'm sure somewhere in the 80s and 90s, I feel like I've seen Prince wear a jacket like that. I feel like I've seen Madonna wear a jacket like that. You know, I feel like somebody must have worn a jacket like it's not the most outlandish thing. No. But it's just the fact that she chooses to wear it to work.
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't wear that to work.
Right. And also, like, it's definitely a day she's expecting him in the office, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's not like it's oh, well, you know, I'm just going to dress up because I feel like it, but nobody's going to be there, so it doesn't really matter kind of a day.
It's just, yeah. But then the fact that we can have that conversation, right, shows you how well they layer in their characters, because we are talking about them like they exist, like they have a life before this scene and a life after this scene that's real. That they, do you know what I mean? The office dynamics.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's amazing how effectively they convey that, just through the way they stand, the postures, the gestures, as well as the dialogue. You know, there's something about the way he goes to his desk and checks on everything that is very him.
Yeah.
But I also know that it also reminds me of me when I had, worked in offices, and did that sort of thing. It's kind of very...
I'm wondering how many times he actually goes back to that office as well. If he's like a traveling hitman with a fax machine in his car.
That's a good point.
Yeah, and I think that is an element of this, is that I feel like his presence in the office is rare. I suspect that even when he's not on a job, he probably doesn't come into the office all that often. And I think the main reason that he does this time around is to get Marcella to look after his cat, and that's really the primary reason. Everything else could have been handled over the phone, but he felt like he needed to go in to ask her to take care of the cat whilst he's out. Although, I don't know if that holds together, because I don't think he's actually made that decision
or maybe to
at the time.
or maybe trying to get a better grip as to what went wrong or
Yes,
what's going to happen
that's a good
Mm.
point.
as well.
Because there is that
Yeah.
issue as well. I mean, he kind of knows that he's at some point he's got to face up to the fact that we've got to talk about how it went wrong and why. Because she's the one dealing
Yes.
with the clients. She's the one who'll be getting the earful.
Yeah.
You know. So yeah, that is definitely a point of interest in how they. I mean, and that comes back to something you said, Billy, in an earlier episode when we were just the idea of whether or not they had. Whether or not there was an implied familial relationship in the through the casting of brother and sister,
Yeah.
And it kind of comes back to that idea, doesn't it, of how much how they've put together these characters and the way it works between them, and this whole notion of, as you were saying, Dev, you know, she's in some ways because she has to do all the support work. She's kind of the senior one in the relationship because without her he doesn't function. But he's still the figurehead of the job. He's the key person out there doing things. Yep. And so when something goes wrong, yeah, they're going to have to talk about it. It can't be something that can just be put to bed. He can't rely on her, even if he wants to just. You know.
Yeah, she is his support, and that's what he's possibly seeking, but not outwardly saying so.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I'm just noticing now is that he doesn't even have a computer at his desk. She's the one with the computer. She's the one that actually clearly does all of the, you know, everything, right?
Yeah.
Presumably the finance management, the ordering, the bookings, the
she's all of
calendar,
those.
like everything is on her.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And again, probably not an office he spends very much time in. He kind of is almost playing with parts of the office as if he doesn't really hasn't really interacted with them before.
Yeah,
he kind of pokes at that painting, wondering if is that new, is it old?
You do wonder when was the last time he was in there, right? Right. I think that's probably as much as we're going to get, Dev.
I think that's a good stopping point for minute 10.
Absolutely.
This was minute 10 of the Grosse Point Blank podcast, Debi Radio's 79.5 FM, featuring your hosts, co-writers, and co-producers, myself, Dev Sodiga, and Hugh David.
Today's guest was Billy Holku, self-professed generic nerd. Billy, where can people find you online?
You can find me and my glorious pictures of food and dim sum at Dim Sum Discussions on Instagram.
Fantastic, thank you. And you can find us at all good podcast players, as well as on YouTube, X, and Spotify with the handle at Debi Radio, DEBI Radio, and also on our website, debiradio.com. And for all of those, it is indeed, once again, DEBI Radio.
We'll be back next week with the next 5 minutes of this podcast. And in the meantime, or at any time, if you want to talk with us, you can join our Facebook listeners group, Debi Radio 79.5 FM Fan Club. That's Debi Radio 79.5 FM Fan Club, where we talk about this movie, other movies, movies in general, and movie making.
Sure was clear that all of this was new. Concentrating hard like a little girl, smoking for the first time. It wasn't a moment, it was a feeling.